Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Anne and today I'm going to give you my October wrap-up. So in October I read 5 books, which is considerably better than September when I only read 1 book. But I have to say a few of the books that I did finish in October were books I already started in September. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the 5 books that I read in October. The first book I finished in October was 1984 by George Orwell. This is one of the books I started in September and it was also actually a buddy read I did with Julia from Books Bunny and Me. And this was also a reread for me. I read this in high school and I really wanted to reread it because I remembered I really liked it. But now I wanted to read it while I was fully able to comprehend it. And I gave it 5 stars. It was even better than I remembered it, and it's definitely one of my favorite books of all time. I have a lot of thoughts on this, and I actually filmed a separate video about my reread of this. And it's the first video in what I hope will be a new series called, I think I named it Project Reread. But yeah, I give you a full review of my thoughts and I go into it rather deep. So if you want to know more about my thoughts about 1984, I suggest you go watch that video. I'll link it up above. The second book I finished in October is another book I already started in September, and it's In the Presence of the Enemy by Elizabeth George. This is the 8th book in the Inspector Lynley series, and I've read all other 7 of them as well, so I knew I was going to like this. And I was right, I gave it 4 stars. I don't want to talk about the plot of this book too much because I don't want to give anything away, but it's about the kidnapping of the 10-year-old daughter of the Undersecretary of State for the Home Office, so a pretty big name in the government of England. And the reason why this girl Charlotte is kidnapped is because the kidnapper wants the father of the girl to reveal himself. And the father is actually a controversial person, so the mother really doesn't want the public to know who this father is. That seems like a pretty difficult explanation, but I'm going with it. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I actually guessed who the kidnapper was, but I didn't guess it really early on, only about I think 200 pages from the end. And it didn't really ruin my enjoyment of the book. It actually made me a little proud that I was able to figure out who the person was. The only thing that I didn't really like about this book is that the first part is really slow and that the 2 main characters of the series, Lynley and Havers, aren't even present in the first part. They're only introduced in the second part, and that was a bit of a bummer because one of the reasons I read these books is for those 2 characters. But yeah, overall I really enjoyed this book. The third book I finished in October is an audiobook that I started in September, and that is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is a young adult contemporary book about a girl who is still in high school but who has a 2-year-old daughter, I don't know, a very young daughter, and it's about how she has to manage being a mother while also being in high school and having her own hopes and dreams for her life. And I gave it 3.5 stars. I enjoyed it, but I didn't fully connect to it. I really thought it was very interesting to see how Imani dealt with the situation and how her life was changed by her daughter, both in very good ways and in not so very positive ways. I liked the relationship Imani has with her grandmother, who cares for both her and her daughter. I didn't really care about the romance in the book. It was fun, the guy was fun, but just wasn't really interested in it. What I did enjoy was that there's a lot of food. Imani really loves to cook, it's her passion, and there's recipes throughout the book as well, but those didn't really come across to me because I listened to it on audiobook, and that's I think one of my problems with this. I didn't really enjoy listening to this book. It's narrated by the author herself, which is really cool in theory, but she made it sound more like poetry than like prose, and that really took me out of the story a couple of times. And later I actually found out that Elizabeth Acevedo is a slam poet, so it makes sense that she narrated it a bit more like she would tell her poetry, but for me it didn't really work. Also, the sentence she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding was used like 3 times. And the first time it actually made me laugh. I thought, well, that's a fun reference to the meme basically, but then it happened a second and a third time and I just figured now it's a bit cringy. But yeah, in summary, I did enjoy the book, but it wasn't really that memorable for me. Then the 4th book I finished in October is another book I started in September, and that book is The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. I said in my video, I think it was an October TBR, no, it was a September wrap-up kind of thing. I talked about how I was reading this and how it was kind of slow and I wasn't really enjoying that much, and I pledged to both you and myself that I would finish it in October. And I did. I finished it finally. I gave it 3 stars. Like I said in previous videos and in my review of The Fellowship of the Ring, I like the concept, I like the story, I like the world, but the way it's written down just isn't really for me. I'm still going to read The Return of the King. I want to pull through, and I did enjoy parts of this, but for me it was just too slow and written in a way that took the suspense out of the story for me. To me, it became a lot less interesting when the Fellowship parted, basically. And I also didn't really like that the 2 parts of the Fellowship that are still left have completely separate stories. I know that they're separate from each other, but I would have liked to see the stories intertwine a little bit more. That we have a chapter from one group and then we have a chapter from the other group. But what happened was that book 3, I think it was, book 3 was all about one part of the Fellowship and book 4 was all about the other part. And that just made it a little more static to me, I guess. Mostly, I'm just really happy that I've now finished the book. And I'm going to wait to read The Return of the King until 2020. I was planning on reading it in 2019, but I needed a bit of a break from The Lord of the Rings. It's not like I hate the books, I just need some time in between them to recover, I guess. And the last book I read in October, and I fully read this one in October, is Let's Talk About Love by Claire Kahn. This is a YA contemporary rom-com kind of story about a girl called Alice. I keep forgetting her name for some reason. Alice is biromantic and asexual, and at the start of the story her girlfriend breaks up with her because she doesn't want to have sex or because she doesn't enjoy the sex they are having, which is rough. But the story is about her and figuring out how her asexuality works for her, what it means for her life, what it means for her. And then she meets Takumi, who is a new co-worker at her work. She works at the library. And then she starts having feelings for him that she didn't know she could have. And at first I was a little scared that she would figure out, oh wait, I'm not asexual, I just hadn't met the right person yet, but that's not what's going on here. I think it's really a good representation for asexuality, and I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It's one of the most fun and enjoyable YA rom-coms I've read in a while. The only thing that I didn't really like was the writing style, particularly at first. It felt a little sloppy and amateurish at some points, and the dialogues felt a bit unnatural sometimes, and the descriptions just were a little bit all over the place. It really felt like a debut novel to me, and I'm pretty sure that it is a debut novel. But at first it took me out of the story a couple of times, but then later on I just was so fully immersed in the story that I didn't really care anymore. So if you're looking for a fun book about an asexual character, I would definitely recommend this one. So those were all the books I read in October. Please let me know what you've read in October, and if you've read and liked any of the books that I read in October. Please like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more of me, and have a wonderful day. Bye!